Last week I woke up with hip pain. Every time I took a step, I had this sharp, blinding pain in the side of my hip. I had strained my glute med muscle tendon. Now, as a physiotherapist, I treat this all the time, so stay tuned. I'm going to give you my top tips to settle, treat and strengthen this really important muscle. The glute med muscle originates at the posterior aspect of the pelvis, and it loops around and inserts into the top of the femur with its tendon. This helps provide stability around the hip. This muscle is incredibly important when you're running. It basically provides pelvic stability every time your foot hits the ground. I flared my glute med up by changing my training up. Now, here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're heading into summer, track season, so I've decided to run a little bit more track. Over the last few weeks, I've changed my intensity. Now, every time you change your training, whether it be that dosage with frequency or intensity, and you don't give your system enough time to adapt, boom, this is where injuries develop. Remember, 80% of injuries are due to training error. So how do we deal with it? Well, first of all, I deloaded my running. Basically stopped running for a few days. I iced that tendon in the side of the hip. I did some foam rolling to help offload that glute med muscle at the back of the pelvis. And then I also did some stretching. So just stretched it. So you've really got to, first of all, look after that environment, deload, and allow that healing to take place in the first instance. Now, the second phase is really important. You need to turn the muscle back on and strengthen it. Now, big tip, when you have a muscle tendon injury, the system inhibits that muscle. When you have pain, you get inhibition of muscle firing. Now, this is the system simply protecting itself. And it's great for the first few days, but after a while, if you don't address that misfiring, then you can come up with some real issues around that muscle working correctly and maladaptive patterns. So it's really important to turn the muscle on. Now, I fire the glute med muscle up with some clams. With the clam, it's really important to get this right. So you're lying on your side, knees together, making sure your hips are stacked. And then you simply rotate forward a little bit to ensure that you're engaging that glute med and not just using your lateral thigh. So rotate it forward and then lift the knee like a clam and engage that glute med. Wake it up. Even put your hand on the side of that glute to ensure that it's firing. Then once you've woken the glute med up, move into some glute med stabilization exercises, namely the modified side plank. This really gets the obliques working in harmony with the glute med to provide that stability. So with the modified side plank, make sure that you're again straight and stacked. Move the pelvis up, and then you can progress it by lifting that top leg to really get that glute med in the downward position firing. Then finish off that strengthening with some crab walking. So putting a band around the ankles or knees and just mobilize in a crab walk, that side walk for around 8 to 10 meters times 2 each direction. Really making sure you're working on that stance leg to stabilize as you push out with the driving leg. This really fires that glute med up in a more functional position. This progression from the clam to the modified side plank to finally the crab walk can take anywhere from 3, maybe even to 10 days, depending on how irritated that glute med tendon is. So just stay within capacity and work through those steps to first awaken and then strengthen that glute med after an injury. So after you've looked after that environment for healing, and then you've woken the muscle up, strengthened it, stretched it, then you can try out some hops. And when you can do your hops in control, pretty much pain-free, you can begin your running journey again. So now, get out, earn those miles, champion compassion, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next video.